Imagine a world where every word, every phrase, every story only had one meaning. Doesn't that sound a little bit dull? The beauty of language lies in its ability to be interpreted in countless ways, and this is something that classrooms all around the world should strive to teach. Now, consider the case of Mrs. Smith, a high school English teacher from a small town in Texas. Mrs. Smith knew the importance of interpretation in understanding and appreciating literature. She did not want her students to simply recite facts and quotes. She wanted them to dive deep into the text, to explore the hidden meanings, to question, to interpret. So, how did she achieve this? She decided to introduce her students to the classic novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. Instead of simply reading the book, she asked her students to become the characters. She assigned each student a character from the book and asked them to write a diary entry from that character's perspective. This exercise forced the students to think from the character's point of view, to understand their motivations, their fears, their desires. By doing this, Mrs. Smith was not just teaching her students about a book, but she was teaching them about empathy, about understanding different perspectives, about interpretation. The students were no longer just reading words on a page, they were living the story. They were interpreting it in their own unique ways. And the results were remarkable. Not only did the students develop a deep understanding of the book, but they also developed a love for literature, a love for interpretation. So, what can we learn from Mrs. Smith's approach? Firstly, interpretation is not just about understanding the meaning of words or phrases. It's about understanding the context, the motivations, the emotions behind those words. Secondly, interpretation is not a solitary act, it's a collaborative effort. Mrs. Smith's students learned more from each other's interpretations than they would have from a textbook. And finally, teaching interpretation is not about providing answers, it's about encouraging questions. Mrs. Smith didn't tell her students what the book meant, she guided them to find their own meanings. In conclusion, interpretation is a powerful tool in the world of education. It encourages critical thinking, fosters empathy, and instills a love for learning. And as Mrs. Smith demonstrated, teaching interpretation doesn't have to be a daunting task. It can be an exciting journey of exploration and discovery. So, let's all take a leaf out of Mrs. Smith's book and embrace the power of interpretation in our classrooms.